Alright. This is from Monogatato's Hardcore Media. Review of this alien being reveals truth about Earth. Matilda McElroy, Part 3, debriefed, same thing. Anyways, this is from Area 52. Shout out to those where I'm getting it from. His site. Now, the nurses involved with Roswell, I believe, at least one of them was killed. Second one, I don't know if there was a second one, I don't remember exactly. I know there was one, she was killed in a crash. She couldn't handle what had happened, what she'd seen of that alien ET. Scared shit out of her. The smells and odors of the dead and everything. So this is a supposed nurse and everything that had an encounter. Of course, with one of them, I've heard, psychic images.
Airports, I really didn't think much of anything of it. Well, the glow started getting brighter and brighter and brighter, and I started hearing a low hum. It was about 1 a.m. Everybody else in the house was asleep, and all of a sudden I started seeing like an orange glow outside of my front window. We lived right next to an airport, so I really didn't think much of anything of it. Well, the glow started getting brighter and brighter and brighter, and I started hearing a low hum. And it wasn't like an electronic hum that I've heard before. So I kind of started freaking out a little bit, like, what's going on? Is there a helicopter getting close to my apartment? I just really didn't know. So I got up and looked outside. And what I saw was a disc-shaped object hovering probably about 400 or 500 feet away from the apartment up in the sky.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Chris Ramsey, and welcome back to yet another episode of Debriefed. And today we are going to be continuing our read-through of the Alien Interview by Lawrence R. Spencer. Allegedly, 1947, this nurse was given permission, or she was the only one able to communicate with the last surviving alien that crashed at Roswell, and since then has sent her notes to the author here. And he took the transcripts verbatim and published them here. And this is basically a discussion between a person and an alien. And the alien, known as Errol, who identifies as an ISB being the spirit that inhabits all living sentient beings, including ourselves, has revealed to us that they've been monitoring and visiting Earth for thousands of years. And Errol, as a matter of fact, is over, I think, close to 500 million years old. I don't know. This story gets a little wild, and starting now, it gets even wilder. Before we get started, there are multiple ways that you guys can help out Area 52 if you want to do that for free. Obviously, leave a like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, but also if you're listening to this on iTunes or Spotify, leave us a review there. A 5-star review goes a long way. If you want to take it one step further, you can visit area52.shop.
Shout out Area 52, everybody. Again, I'm doing this over fair use and my own experiences.
You don't have to be a physicist to read physics books, although you probably have to be a physicist to understand what's in the physics books, but you can read them without becoming a physicist. Information. All right, let's go. Errol described the abilities of an ISB officer of the domain to me, and she demonstrated one to me when she contacted telepathically a communications officer of the domain who is stationed in the asteroid belt. Whoa. So Errol's got some type of instant Wi-Fi, communication going here with the domain in the asteroid belt. The asteroid belt is composed about that stance, and that's usually what we're seeing in these arguments in the community and information. Take it in. You probably have to be a physicist to understand what's in. Why do you have to commit to something? Why is everything so binary? Just absorb the information. And that's it. Only when we have a strong conviction about something do we become defensive about that stance. And that's usually what we're seeing in these arguments in the community and everything else. So, just take it as information. All right, let's go. Errol described the abilities of an ISB officer of the domain to me. And she demonstrated one to me when she contacted, telepathically, a communications officer of the domain who is stationed in the asteroid belt.
Telepathy.
So Errol's got some type of instant Wi-Fi, communication going here with the domain in the asteroid belt. The asteroid belt is composed of thousands of broken up pieces of a planet that once existed between Mars and Jupiter. It serves as a good low-gravity jumping-off point for incoming spacecraft traveling toward the center of our galaxy.
Right, I've heard that.
She requested that this officer consult information stored in the files of the domain concerning the history of Earth. She asked the communications officer to feed this information to Errol. The communications officer immediately complied with the request. Based on the information stored in the files of the domain, Errol was able to give me a brief overview or history lesson. This is what Errol told me that the domain had observed about the history of Earth. Okay, here we go. She told me that the domain expeditionary force first entered the Milky Way galaxy very recently, only about 10,000 years ago. Their first action was to conquer the home planets of the Old Empire. This is not the official name, but a nickname given to the conquered civilization by the domain forces. The Old Empire that served as the seat of central government for this galaxy and other adjoining regions of space. These planets are located in the star systems in the tail of the Big Dipper constellation. She did not mention which stars exactly. About 1,500 years later, the domain began the installation bases for their forces along the path of invasion, which led towards the center of this galaxy and beyond. About 8,200 years ago, the domain forces set up a base on Earth in the Himalaya Mountains near the border of modern Pakistan and Afghanistan. This was a base for a battalion of the domain expeditionary force, which included about 3,000 members. This is sounding a lot more like Star Wars. And, the beauty about Star Wars and the reason why I think it gained so much popularity is because at some level, it resonates true with our own perspective of what the universe or what the galaxies might be like if they were inhabited by, an empire. And that's the one thing I will say about this topic in particular, especially when I hear about the Galactic Federation and things like that. Like, I want nothing more, let's be clear, than for all of this to be real. I mean, if this is real, then to some extent, Jedi Force and lightsabers are real. Right? I mean, where are we going to draw the line here? All right. They set up a base under or inside the top of a mountain. The mountain was drilled into and made hollow to create an area large enough to house the ships and personnel of that force. An electronic illusion of the mountaintop was created to hide the base by projecting a false image from inside the mountain against a force screen. The ships could then enter and exit through the force screen, yet remain unseen by Homo sapiens. This is interesting because Lacerda, in the Lacerda files, which we've read, which was a reptilian who, they said they lived underground, they also had something similar. Wasn't a force screen necessarily, unless we're talking about the same thing, but I think the one that Lacerda described was something that interfaced with human beings' perception of things. So they didn't actually have to distort anything visually, they just had to distort the impression of it in our minds. Shortly after they settled there, the base was surprised by an attack from a remnant of the military forces of the Old Empire. Unbeknownst to the domain, a hidden underground base on Mars, operated by the Old Empire, had existed for a very long time. The domain base was wiped out by the military attack from the Mars base, and the ISBs of the domain expeditionary force were captured. You can imagine that the domain was very upset about losing such a large force of officers and crew, so they sent other crews to Earth to look for them. Those crews were also attacked. The captured ISBs from the domain forces were handled in the same fashion as all other ISBs who have been sent to Earth. They were each given amnesia, had their memories replaced with false pictures and hypnotic commands and sent to Earth to inhabit biological bodies. They are still a part of the human population today. Whoa! Hold on a second. Wait, what? What are we talking about here? Are we saying that some of these Isbies are among us and they don't know it? Whoa. After a very persistent and extensive investigation into the loss of their crews, the Domain discovered that Old Empire had been operating a very extensive and carefully hidden base of operations in this part of the galaxy for millions of years. No one knows exactly how long. Eventually, the spacecraft of the Old Empire forces and the Domain engaged each other in open combat in the space of the solar system. I wonder if this could be the war that Lacerda was also referring to, but I feel like that war was much older. But perhaps this is... No, actually it was that, because it was like the Younger Dryas, right? It was like 10,000 years ago or something like that. According to Errol, there was a running battle between the Old Empire forces and the Domain until about 1235 AD, when the Domain forces finally destroyed the last spacecraft of the Old Empire. The Domain Expeditionary Force lost so many of its own ships in this area during that time also. About 1,000 years later, the Old Empire base was discovered by accident in the spring of 1914. The discovery was made when the body of an Archduke of Austria was taken over, in quotes, by an officer of the Domain Expeditionary Force. This officer, who was stationed in the asteroid belt, was sent to Earth on a routine mission to gather reconnaissance. Okay, hold on. So they sent one of the Isby spirits down to take over this Archduke of Austria. Now, we got a footnote here. I'm curious to know who this Archduke might be. Franz Ferdinand. Whoa, okay. He was an Archduke of Austria, Prince of Imperial of Austria, and Prince Royal of Hungary and Bohemia. But here we go, 1914.
I get chills. Yeah, and he was killed, and that's what sparked World War One. Holy shit. I've seen the dead come back to life. Wow. Stupid ass extremists killed that guy. Archduke Ferdinand. Jeez, I've done so much stuff on... His name is run through my mind.
June 28th at 11:15 a.m. Franz Ferdinand and his wife were killed in Sarajevo. Like the event known as the Assassination Sarajevo, which triggered World War I. So the purpose of the takeover was to use the body as a disguise through which to infiltrate human society in order to gather information about current events on Earth. The officer, as an Isby, having greater power than the being inhabiting the body of the Archduke, simply pushed the being out and took control of the body. Whoa! Really treating them like puppets. However, this officer did not realize how much Habsburg were hated by feuding factions in the country. So he was caught off guard when the body of the Archduke was assassinated by a Bosnian student. The officer, or Isby, was suddenly knocked out of the body when it was shot by the assassin. Disoriented, the Isby inadvertently penetrated one of the amnesia force screens and was captured.
The Habsburgs being the royal family.
Okay. So the Isby leaves the body of the Archduke, penetrates the force screen, gets captured by, I'm guessing, the Empire. Eventually, the Domain discovered that a wide area of space is monitored by an electronic force field, which controls all of the Isbys in this end of the galaxy, including Earth. The electronic force screen is designed to detect Isbys and prevent them from leaving this area. Whoa. If an Isby attempts to penetrate the force screen, it captures them in a kind of electronic net. The result is that the captured Isby is subjected to a very severe brainwashing treatment, which erases the memory of the Isby. This process uses a tremendous
Isby just is like interstellar biological entity. to severe brainwashing treatment, which erases the memory of the ESP. What the fuck? This is a trace around an electrical shock. It's like Earth psychiatrist's electric shock that she erased. Well, it's not. No, it's not just. That's not what electric shock is about. It's also about changing their thinking and whatever brain problems they have with their attitudes or whatever from I'd say
electrical shock. Just like Earth psychiatrists use electric shock therapy to erase the memory and personality of a patient and to make them more cooperative.
It's not just memories you don't. That's not what electric shock is. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. Oh my god. That has to do with other psychological problems that you have. And everything. It has nothing to do with memories. That's not, you don't know what the fuck you're talking. I've been around this
that's
stuff
crazy.
personally, so I know a lot more.
So like anyone who dies, when their spirit goes, they're zapped if they go past this barrier. And then their memories are once again erased and they have to go back. On Earth, this therapy uses only a few hundred volts of electricity. However, the electrical voltage used by the old Empire operation against ISB is on the order of magnitude of billions of volts. This tremendous shock completely wipes out all memory of the ISB. The memory erasure is not just for one life or one body. It wipes out all of the accumulated experiences of a nearly infinite past, as well as the identity of the ISB. The shock is intended to make it impossible for the ISB to remember who they are, where they came from, their knowledge or skills, their memory of the past, and ability to function as a spiritual entity. They are overwhelmed into becoming a mindless, robotic non-entity. Whoa, so they're out here creating NPCs, is what I'm gathering from this. But only if you sort of go out of line, only if you try to escape the Matrix, which is wild because if you have seen the recent interview featuring Matt Brown, a whistleblower, this interview was conducted by George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell on his show Weaponized. It was a 3-part series, very fascinating, but this guy came across the documents now known, now presented to Congress as Immaculate Constellation, which we've covered. If you want to see the entire read-through of that document, very fascinating. Go and check that out. But he does mention a few cryptic things.
I think humanity, to some level, is a resource for them. Possibly a commodity, possibly a form of entertainment, possibly medical related. We live in the Matrix.
Yeah.
You are not free. And this reality has far more to it than you have been allowed to believe.
But that Matrix comment really gels with what we're talking about here. It also really coalesces with, the container idea.
We're in a simulation.
Ooh, I don't like the sound of this. All right. Let's keep reading. After the shock, a series of post-hypnotic suggestions are used to install false memories and a false time orientation in each ISB. This includes the command to return to the base after the body dies, so that the same kind of shock and hypnosis can be done again and again, forever. The hypnotic command also tells the patient to forget to remember. What the domain learned from the experience of this officer is that the old Empire has been using Earth as a prison planet for a very long time. Exactly how long is unknown, perhaps millions of years. Whoa. What's interesting about this theory, because I've heard this theory before, but it's almost...
I could see that. Well, I've always felt that this is a prison planet. When I was put here, when I was, jeez, I don't know, I can't explain this right. Wait, people can understand, but ever since I was little, I can remember we were in a simulation. I've always known that. And I would go nowhere in school. Of course, some were half deaf at least or more, and so I couldn't hear anything that was going on. But I see all stuff happening around me, and I would just say like, "Why the fuck is everyone doing this shit?" I just say like, "Why is everyone doing this stupid stuff? This is so stupid." And teachers asked me to do stuff, and so I didn't understand, and some of it I just didn't like. Why? Why do this? Putting geometric shapes, into holes and stuff like that, squares, circles, stuff like that. I'm like, why? Why? This is so retarded, so stupid. Why do it? And I always remember that this reality is fake reality, that we're in a simulation and stuff like that. And all this that we're doing right now is all
it's like
fake.
the
it's
sort of
facades.
karmic circle that we're trying to escape, but we keep having to sort of relive something. I've also heard people, remote viewers, I think, have looked into this as well and have found something, some technology suppressing the soul somehow. I don't even know, right? It's very fringe stuff, but I've heard like when you pass and you see the light, that's actually like that's a ruse, right? That's like, don't go towards it because that's maybe what this is. Whoa. It's crazy to think about, dude. That's so dark, One thing.
The sad thing is, I've been through that and stuff like that. And there's other dimensions. It's like you're supposed to go through that. I mean, everyone has their theory and stuff like that. But I mean, now could there be a fake light at the end of the tunnel? Yeah, there could. But I mean, that's where we're supposed to go when we die. Is go towards that light into the afterlife, to go to heaven and see our loved ones on the other side and everything like that. So that, unless there's a fake one I don't know about, that's the one we're supposed to go to.
I always think about is
stuff like that.
What is so dark
stuff like that's where we're supposed to go.
That when somebody finds out what the secret of the phenomenon is, they refuse to share it with others. What is that? How can it be so bad? Because if it's good, then there's no reason to keep it secret, right? And I think Matt Brown talks about that as well. There's no reason to keep it secret if it's good. So, okay, let's say it is bad. It's got to be pretty bad in order to keep it like that much of a secret, because I think the public could handle aliens. Complete speculation, and they could be wrong, but I'm saying as a thought experiment, what would that be? And I think the scariest thing that I could possibly imagine is when you're free of the physical body and you go beyond and you think, oh, this is, I leave the Matrix, that's still them. I don't know if I like that. Whoa. Yeah, that would be enough to drive people mad. But hey, what are you gonna do? If that is the case, whatever. What do you want to do? So, when the body of an ISB dies, they depart from the body. They are detected by the force screen. They are captured and ordered by hypnotic command to return to the light. Yep, there you go. The idea of heaven and the afterlife are part of the hypnotic suggestion, a part of the.
Well, this is where I punch holes into that. That's mainly Western, religion type of thing. That's mostly where Western religions get into that. Where some others, tribal or whatever, I think, just go different other places and everything. And most people don't even know about, these near-death experiences unless they look it up. They don't know anything about this. They don't know, go to the light. They don't know anything about that. So, I mean, I kind of punch holes into that. And call BS on that. I mean, he isn't saying that any of this is true or whatever. It's just, he's just putting out a story and everything. But I mean, most people don't even know about going to the light unless they look up stuff on near-death experiences or Highway to Heaven. That series from late 80s, early 90s, and stuff. But I mean, there's a lot of people that don't even know to go to a light at the end of the tunnel, and they don't know anything about that. And there are plenty of lost spirits that roam the earth that don't even know about to go to the light. They, dead spirits, they don't know anything about that whatsoever. So there's been lots of cases that I've seen where dead spirits have been, plaguing people in their homes, and dead spirits walking the earth, and they don't know anything about light at the end of the tunnel. They were given
treachery that makes the whole mechanism work.
To go to the light or anything. So
crazy. But also, if you give me heaven or afterlife, be it real or fake, I mean, if I don't know the difference, ignorance is bliss. But that would suck. After the Isby has been shocked and hypnotized to erase the memory of the life they just lived, the Isby is immediately commanded hypnotically to report back to Earth, as though they were on a secret mission to inhabit a new body. Each Isby is told that they have...
Now, I do see fact in this where people are reincarnated and stuff, and I have my own reincarnated type of experiences or whatever. People have that stuff erased. Usually would have that erased, and there's only a few people that would know that they have past lives through hypnotherapy or
They have a special purpose for being on Earth. But of course there is no purpose for being in a prison, at least not for the prisoner.
I could see.
Whoa. I don't like this. I don't like I don't like this at all. If this is what's going on, this is not cool.
But we are prisoners. We are prisoners here. I mean, that is a fact. It's something that I know of every day. I'm a prisoner in this body. I'm a prisoner on this earth. And that's what I hate.
Don't do that, old Empire.
That's just the facts.
Quit it.
Or not.
Any undesirable Isbys who were sentenced to Earth were classified as untouchable by the old Empire. This included anyone that the old Empire judged to be criminals who are too vicious to be reformed or subdued, as well as other criminals such as sexual perverts or beings unwilling to do any productive work. So a literal prison planet, like they're sending prisoners here. An untouchable classification of Isbys also includes a wide variety of political prisoners. This includes Isbys who are considered to be
I could also give that credence for carnates, where evil spirits have inhabited, taken flesh. You're talking about the cold-blooded killers and stuff like that. Their parents. They're not a byproduct of their parasitic weight. Those killers were those evil spirits filled the flesh. And we are spirits and stuff like that. And it had nothing to do with the pairs, those killers. It's just an evil spirit took that body, was sent into those bodies. And
compliant free thinkers or revolutionaries who make trouble for the governments of the various planets of the old empire. Of course, anyone with a previous military record against the old empire is also shipped off to Earth. A list of untouchables include artists, painters, singers, musicians, writers, actors, and performers of every kind. For this reason, Earth has more artists per capita than any other planet in the old empire. Now that's something I can get behind, folks. Part of this is like nice and neatly packaged, I will say as well, for the reader. And then we're we can't all be prisoners. And then like the next sentence is like, no, but there's also really cool artists and really free thinkers. And we're like, yeah, that's me. Everybody's like, that's me. So it is, I do understand the fiction side of it. But again, I will say, for someone who, I think Lawrence R. Spencer is a fiction, obviously a nonfiction or science fiction writer, but the depth of lore here, I mean, it's really, really deep. And I don't want to call, Lawrence an amateur writer, because I don't think he's an amateur writer. Yeah, but I mean, this is so deep. It's easy to chalk it up to, oh, this guy just made it up. But kudos if you made it up, because this is a really well-rounded hypothetical universe that this person's created. And I think that deserves merit in and of itself. Untouchables also include intellectuals, inventors, and geniuses in almost every field. Since everything the old empire considers valuable has long since been invented or created over the last few trillion years, they have no further use for such beings. This includes skilled managers also, which are not needed in a society of obedient robotic citizens. We're trapped with all the Karens here, folks. Anyone who is not willing or able to submit to mindless economic, political, and religious servitude as a tax-paying worker in the class system of the old empire are untouchable and sentenced to receive memory wipeout and permanent imprisonment on Earth. The net result is that the ISB is unable to escape because they can't remember who they are, where they came from, or where they are. They have been hypnotized to think they are someone, something, sometime, and somewhere other than where they really are. The domain officer who was assassinated while in the body of Archduke of Austria was likewise captured by the old Empire force. Because this particular officer was a high-powered ISB, compared to most, he was taken away to a secret old Empire base under the surface of the planet Mars. They put him into a special electronic prison cell and held him there. Fortunately, this domain officer was able to escape from the underground base after 27 years in captivity. When he escaped from the old Empire base, he returned immediately to his own base in the asteroid belt. His commanding officer ordered that a battle cruiser be dispatched to the coordinates of the base provided by his officer and to destroy that base completely. This old Empire base was located a few hundred miles north of the equator on Mars in the Cydonia region. It is interesting just right here, because this is all just notes. This is all apparently Matilda's translation of the being's telepathic communications to her. Pretty intense and extensive, and rather detailed, I would say. Almost a little too detailed. You know what I mean? This is turning slowly into just a book and less of a transcript. You feel me on that? Maybe I'm just looking for a reason for this not to be true at this point. I might be.
Right.
But still fascinating, man. Although the military base of the old empire was destroyed, unfortunately most of the vast machinery of the ISB force screens, the electroshock, amnesia, hypnosis machinery continues to function in other discovered locations right up to the present moment. The main base or control center for this mind control prison operation has never been found. So the influences of this base or bases are still in effect. The domain has observed that since the old Empire space forces were destroyed, there is no one left to actively prevent the planetary systems from bringing their own untouchable ISBs to Earth from all over this galaxy and from other galaxies nearby. Therefore, Earth has become a universal dumping ground for this entire region of space. Now, this is ringing true. This is kind of hitting home. This, in part, explains the very unusual mix of races, cultures, languages, moral codes, religious and political influences among the ISB population on Earth. The number and variety of heterogeneous societies on Earth are extremely unusual on a normal planet. Most Sun-type 12 Class 7 planets are inhabited by only one humanoid body type or race, if any.
Oh, God.
In addition, most of the ancient civilizations of Earth and many of the events of Earth have been heavily influenced by the hidden, hypnotic operation of the old Empire base. So far, no one has figured out exactly where and how this operation is run, or by whom, because it is so heavily protected by screens and traps. Furthermore, there's been no operation undertaken to seek out, discover, and destroy the vast and ancient networks of electronics machinery that create the ISB force screens at this end of the galaxy. Until this has been done, we are not able to prevent or interrupt the electric shock operation, hypnosis, and remote thought control of the old Empire prison planet. Of course, all of the crew members of the Domain Expeditionary Force now remain aware of this phenomena at all times while operating in this solar system space so as to prevent detection and the capture by old Empire traps. I don't know how y'all are feeling about this, but I'm feeling a little... I don't like it, you know what I mean? But at the same time, it feels like there is hope in this universe, right? Perhaps this secret war going on between governments or ungovernmented factions of special forces. Perhaps what's happening right now is they're trying to get a hold of this base and destroy it. You know, that would be a cool thing. I would love for that to be the secret. Forces. You know, this whole time we're thinking, no, the U.S. government is completely nefarious and they are hiding things from us for our detriment. When in reality, they're actually fighting this secret war trying to free our souls. That would be such a cool plot for a movie. Oh my God. We proceed to the chunkier half of this read-through.
That'd be cool.
Chapter 8, A Lesson in Recent History. Matilda's personal note, and the only little note that exists. This interview taught me a history lesson I will never read in any textbook written on Earth. The Domain has a much different view of events than we do. I've been reading a few Prison Planet comments before this video and expected to see it in this read-through, but even knowing what I was getting into is still kind of upsetting. The Domain Expeditionary Force has observed a resurgence in science and culture of the Western world since 1150 AD, when the remaining remnants of the space fleet of the old Empire in this solar system were destroyed. The influence of the remote control hypnosis operation diminished slightly after that time, but still remains largely in force. Apparently, a small amount of damage was done to the old Empire remote mind control operation, which resulted in a small decrease in the power of this mechanism. As a result, some memory of technologies that ISBs already knew before they came to Earth started to be remembered. Thereafter, the oppression of knowledge that is called the Dark Ages in Europe began to diminish after that time. Whoa. So they're saying the Dark Ages was a direct result of this hypnotic sort of suppression tool that the old Empire had implemented. You know, the one thing I find interesting is that they said prior that the memories... The shock was so strong that it would completely erase and obliterate people's memory of their almost infinite existence. And now we take down a few of these things and suddenly, oh, memories coming back? Is it this suppression system that's keeping the memories from coming back? Or is it this electronic shock that's completely erasing them? Or is it a mix of both? I don't know. Since then, the knowledge of the basic laws of physics and electricity have revolutionized Earth culture virtually overnight. The ability to remember technology by many of the geniuses in the ISB population of Earth was partially restored, when not so actively suppressed as it was before 1150. Sir Isaac Newton is one of the best examples of this. In only a few decades, he single-handedly reinvented several major and fundamental scientific and mathematical disciplines. I mean, Nikola Tesla would be a great example of that. I think, this guy was just literally getting information from somewhere else. Maybe he was just an officer ISB, doing his job. An officer of the domain, I should say. The men who remembered these sciences already knew them before they were sent to Earth. Ordinarily, no one would ever observe or discover as much about science and mathematics in a single lifetime, or even in a few hundred lifetimes. These subjects have taken civilizations billions and billions of years to create. ISBs on Earth have only just begun to remember small fragments of all the technologies that exist throughout the universe. Theoretically, if the amnesia mechanisms being used against Earth could be broken entirely, ISBs would regain all of their memory. See, that seems to be such like a happy ending type deal. It's like, what is it, man? Are you erasing all of our memory, or is it this thing suppressing them and destroying them would free us all? It sounds too much like a Hollywood plot at this point. I'm not trying to be a hater, but again, I don't quite like the idea of this, so that's why I'm trying. All right, just I don't like the idea of this old empire. Okay. Unfortunately, similar advances have not been seen in the humanities as the ISBs of Earth continue to behave very badly towards each other. This behavior, however, is heavily influenced by the hypnotic commands given to each ISB between lifetimes, and the very unusual combination of inmates on Earth, criminals, perverts, artists, revolutionaries, and geniuses, is the cause of a very restive and tumultuous environment. The purpose of the prison planet is to keep ISBs on Earth forever, promoting ignorance, superstition, and war between ISBs, helps to keep the prison population crippled and trapped behind the wall of electronic force screens. ISBs have been dumped on Earth from all over the galaxy, adjoining galaxies, and from planetary systems all over the old empire, like Sirius, Aldebaran, the Pleiades, Orion, Draconis, and countless others. There are ISBs on Earth from unnamed races, civilizations, cultural backgrounds, and planetary environments. Each of the various ISB populations have their own languages, belief systems, moral values, religious beliefs, training, and unknown and untold histories. These ISBs are mixed together with earlier inhabitants of Earth who came from another star system more than 400,000 years ago to establish the civilizations of Atlanta and Lemuria. Those civilizations vanished beneath the tidal waves caused by the planetary polar shift many thousands of years before the current prison population started to arrive. Apparently, the ISBs from those star systems were the source of the original Oriental races of Earth beginning in Australia. Okay, so if we recall Lacerda, she said that this tidal event that happened was Younger Dryas, was that like 12,000 to 15,000 years ago? What Lacerda said, that was actually the result of a fight between two races, right? The Elohim and the other humanoid beings, or the humanoid and the reptilian beings. Anyways, there was a war, and they kind of wiped everything out. And those waves weren't caused by a meteor or anything. They were caused, by bombs, essentially. On the other hand, the civilizations set up on Earth by the Old Empire prison system were very different from the civilization of the Old Empire itself, which is an electronic space opera, atomic-powered conglomeration of earlier civilizations that were conquered with nuclear weapons and colonized by ISBs from another galaxy. The bureaucracy that controlled the former Old Empire was from an ancient space opera society run by a totalitarian confederation of planetary governments, regulated by a brutal social, economic, and political hierarchy, with a royal monarch as its figurehead. This sounds reptilian. This type of government emerges with regularity on planets where the citizens abandon personal responsibility for autonomous self-regulation. They frequently lose their freedom to demented ISBs who suffer from an overwhelming paranoia that every other ISB is their enemy who must be controlled or destroyed. Their closest friends and allies, whom they espouse to love and cherish, are literally loved to death by them. This is interesting. This type of government, it says this type of government emerges with regularity on planets where citizens abandon personal responsibility for autonomous self-regulation. Sounds a lot like AI. It does sound like AI. Like, what if AI happened, and then these guys come along because they're like, oh, you guys are just going to give up? You're going to give your souls to AI? We'll just take it from here. Because such ISBs exist, the domain has learned that freedom must be won and maintained through eternal vigilance and the ability to use defensive force to maintain it. As a result, the domain has already conquered the governing planet of the old empire. Civilization of the domain, although considerably younger and smaller in size, is already more powerful, better organized, and united by egalitarian esprit de corps, spirit of body, never known in the history of the old empire. So togetherness defeats, this warmongering mentality. The recently despoiled German totalitarian state on Earth was similar to the old empire, but not nearly as brutal. Whoa, really?
Right.
And about 10,000 times less powerful. Many of the ISBs on Earth are here because they are violently opposed to totalitarian government, or because they were so psychotically vicious that they could not be controlled by old empire government. Whoa. So that would make for a planet filled with turmoil and conflict, right? If you send people here who are literally against totalitarian rule, but also people who are psychotic and power hungry, right? That would create constant conflict, which would essentially perpetuate and propel this idea of a prison planet. We'd just be fighting each other blind to the fact that there's a greater fight to be fought. It's a good plan. It's a good plan. Consequently, the population of Earth is disproportionately comprised of a very high percentage of such beings. The conflicting cultural and ethical moral codes of the ISBs on Earth is unusual in the extreme. The domain conquest of the central old empire planets was fought with electronic cannon. The citizens of the old planets forming the core of government for the old empire are filthy, degraded, slave society of mindless tax-paying workers who practice cannibalism, violent automotive racetracks, and bloody Roman circus-type entertainments are their only amusements. Whoa. Regardless of any reasonable justification we may have had for using atomic weapons to vanquish the planets of the old empire, the domain is careful not to ruin the resources of those planets by using weapons of crude radioactive force. The current U.S. civilization is beginning to mimic some of the trappings of that civilization, especially in the design of airplanes, automobiles, ships, trains, and telephones. Likewise, buildings in the cities of Earth are thought to be modern or futuristic if their design resembles the architecture of the old empire. The government of the old empire, before being supplanted by the domain, was comprised of beings who possessed a very craven intelligence, very much like the Axis powers during your recent World War. Those beings manifested precisely the same behavior as the galactic government that exiled them to eternal imprisonment on Earth. They were a gruesome reminder of the ageless maxim that an ISB will often manifest the treatment they have received from others. Kindness fosters kindness. Cruelty begets cruelty. One must be able and willing to use force, tempered with intelligence, to prevent harm to the innocent. However, extraordinary understanding, self-discipline, and courage are required to effectively prevent brutality without being overwhelmed by the malice that motivated the brutality. Only a demonic, self-serving government would employ a law.
I think I'm gonna stop right here. Pretty much looks like it's just me doing this. This ballot could be wrong. I need some sugar, something to keep me awake. Anyways, y'all tell me what you think about this. I mean, there's some reality with what this person is writing. there definitely is, and how we can be seen as a dumping ground for other species, races, and stuff like that, other intelligences, and everything, and how, I mean, when I was put here on this earth and stuff like that throughout, I always knew we were in a simulation. I always knew that. I knew that this was fake, and everything, that everything we're living is fake. I always knew that. My mother, she said, how weird I was and how I was supposed to be grown up. And, it's like, God promised me, I'd be grown up already, I'd be taller and stuff. And I just didn't get why we were doing school, why we were doing this, when I already knew that this reality is fake. All this is fake and everything. So, I mean, and other people are just going on like they're a program. And me, I just didn't want to take part in the program. I didn't want to take part in how people were doing everything. And of course, I lost out on some stuff, and learning and stuff. But it's just, I knew that this is fake reality. It is simulation, and of course, like a matrix and stuff, and how these are not our real bodies. These are not us and everything. We have a soul and everything, and we're part of something greater. So, I mean, I can see truth in fiction and a lot of stuff, but it's a great story. People should look further into this from Area 52 and stuff like that.